The Aggies continue their march through the SEC. South Carolina is next. We've got Leah Musgrave on the line from TexAgs.com. Please check out her work and the rest of the staff. They're covering Texas A&M football and what is proving to be a very intriguing season. Leah, how you doing this afternoon?
So good. You're absolutely right. An intriguing season it is, but halfway done and looking forward to what's next in the second half of the year.
So there was some concern with a hot Arkansas team coming in, much improved. It was an entertaining game with a lot of big plays and high-scoring offense on both sides, but Texas A&M pretty much grabbed that 28-7 lead and were never seriously challenged after that. Kellen Mond's efficiency certainly jumps off the stat sheet at 21 of 26, Leah.
Yes, very comfortable win for A&M. I do know some people who bet that A&M was going to cover and are not very happy right now with those 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns that they allowed. But overall, really comfortable win for A&M. You know, this is the midpoint of an all-SEC schedule, and I think A&M did exactly what they needed to do. And like you said, Mark, this was probably the best Arkansas team that A&M has faced probably since about 2014. And those kids always play so hard against A&M. I think the reason for that is that Arkansas has about 25 kids on their roster that actually are from the state of Texas. The reality is they probably weren't all recruited by Texas A&M. And you know what? They're playing so hard for Sam Pittman and Barry Odom right now. It's really impressive to see how they've turned things around in just a year. I think really Arkansas only would have truly had a shot against A&M if A&M didn't take care of the ball, which they did. They've had some issues with that in the past, but Kellen Mond, like you said, just an outstanding game, 21 of 26. That's over 80% completion. Also had about 290 total yards and 3 touchdowns. Offensive line didn't allow a sack for the 4th straight game. I mean, really just a good performance for A&M.
Outstanding Aggie tight end Jalen Weidemeyer with a nice day at 6 catches, 92 yards. Leah, you definitely prepped us last week for keeping our eye on the Aggie wide receiver core that's developing right now. Your thoughts about their performance?
You know, my favorite thing about this Aggie offense right now is that it's not just one guy. You can point to several different skill players and say, oh, well, maybe he's the guy to watch, or maybe it's him. It could be Jalen Weidemeyer. It could be Isaiah Spiller. It could be Aniyah Smith or Chase Lane. And a new name that I'll give you to watch is Devon Achane. He was a 4-star kid, true freshman this year, just elite level speed from Fort Bend Marshall High School. Already going to make an impact for this Aggie team. And when you look at the depth that A&M had last year, they've really grown a tremendous amount. And it's exciting to see them shape up every single week. I think it's finally starting to come together for A&M, and it's just going to be one of these week-to-week approaches where we just continue to see that core of receivers get better. Now, it also helps that Hezekiah Jones is back and healthy. I think the Aggies are kind of rolling right now on that front.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the SEC with Texas A&M traveling to Columbia, South Carolina. Kind of an interesting crossover game that has been designated by the SEC. So if you're not familiar, the SEC schedule has 2 crossovers. One is set, i.e., Tennessee, Alabama. They play every year. It's a rivalry game as designated. The other game rotates, and this is Texas A&M's crossover game. Of course, that's been somewhat compromised, of course, by the 10-game schedule and the additional out-of-division games. But South Carolina, Texas A&M has been one of those games that's been scheduled each and every year. Any thought among the Aggie fan base in regards to whom was chosen? Because most of them, like Tennessee, Alabama, like LSU, Florida, certainly Auburn, Georgia, makes sense. And then the other ones seem to just be filling a slot. Thoughts about playing South Carolina every year?
Well, I think the most interesting part about this matchup is actually the relationship that Jimbo Fisher has with Will Muschamp. They go back to being Saban assistants together at LSU, and they are very good friends. They even have a beach house together in Florida. And Jimbo Fisher tells us every single year ahead of South Carolina in his press conference that he hates playing coaches that he's good friends with. I do think it is kind of an interesting matchup here. It's not really a true rivalry. Maybe they were trying to fill the spots in here, but I also don't think it helps that it's very lopsided. A&M now is going for win number 7 against the Gamecocks, and so I think that's one of those situations where you look to South Carolina, and obviously every team in the SEC can pose a threat to you, but I don't necessarily see that happening with this team. I think this year in particular, the talent disparity between Texas A&M and South Carolina is also a little bit wider than normal as well.
Leah, before we get to your comment about South Carolina and your review of the Gamecocks before the game on Saturday, Buddy Johnson, we talked about him and the A&M defense. He filled up the stat sheet once again, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, 12 tackles. Your assessment of the entire defense, because when we had you on last week, you were excited about the development on that side of the football.
Still excited about the development on that side of the ball. However, I do think they had some issues up front against Arkansas. They didn't shut down the run like I thought they were going to. Pass rush, I think, is still pretty solid. They did a good job pressuring Felipe Franks, and Tyree Johnson is actually one who was huge in that game. A&M has 14 sacks right now. Last year, they had 29 in 13 games, so you're already about halfway there. I think against Arkansas, if it was a test, you passed. I don't think it was an A+ performance, but I'm not worried about that as I look ahead to the rest of the year, especially considering that Arkansas skill positions are probably better than some other schools on A&M's schedule. I think Felipe Franks is a good, competent SEC quarterback, and at the end of the day, they did their job. But if we're going to take away anything from this Arkansas game, I think it's just you got to clean up the mistakes, get rid of the penalties, and just continue to take care of the ball. And I think the Aggie defense will bounce back a little bit from this one.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. We break down the SEC. We got Leah Musgrave on the line from TexAggs.com, a tremendous site that I've reviewed over the last few weeks. So certainly check out her work and everyone else over there. To the point she just made, Rakeem Boyd, who was one of the top rushers in the SEC last year, off to a slow start this year, hit up the Aggies for 100 yards on 18 carries, and Felipe Franks out of the quarterback spot with 91 yards. Colin Hill, South Carolina's quarterback, pretty mobile guy, transfer from Colorado State. So as you look over South Carolina and their uneven season with some ups and downs, a big win at home a couple weeks ago against Auburn, your thoughts about the Gamecocks?
So I think for A&M entering this matchup, defense is the key. You have to make them one-dimensional and shut down their run game, because that's what they do. I think Kevin Harris is a tremendous tailback that they have on their side, and I don't think South Carolina is going to be too through the air. Shi Smith is a very talented wide receiver that probably poses a little bit of a threat to the Aggie secondary. But Colin Hill doesn't necessarily scare you after you've seen Mac Jones and Kyle Trask. I think they've just got to make him uncomfortable, and they'll be fine if A&M can avoid turnovers, give the rock to Spiller, and just let him go off. Offensive line stays solid. The offensive line leads the SEC right now in sacks allowed, and behind them is Florida, and then behind them is Alabama. So their defensive line doesn't really scare you either. But, on the other side of the ball, they've got a solid O-line, but they struggle in pass protection. South Carolina has allowed 16 sacks so far this year, and so I think if A&M can put some pressure on a mistake-prone quarterback, then they'll probably be fine. And I am fairly confident in an emerging pass rush that the Aggies have against a team that kind of struggles in pass protection right now.
Leah Musgrave, TexAggs.com. Leah, we appreciate you stopping by. Texas A&M at 4-1, 5 down, 5 to go. Should be an interesting home stretch, as we discussed last week, with no one that's daunting, but everybody certainly capable of pulling off the upset against the Aggies. So they're going to have to be on their game each and every week. Road life in the SEC is not necessarily fun. So South Carolina could present a challenge again. They beat Auburn a couple of weeks ago. So Leah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mark.